Welcome to What Have We Learnt? I'm Ben Punter. Hope you're well. Hope you're staying safe as we are back with new episodes here in 2021. You can follow me on Twitter. I am at Ben Punter. You can find us on Facebook. We are What Have We Learnt, all one word. And you can watch or listen to video versions of these interviews over on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Ben Punter, or simply search What Have We Learnt. Look out for the big yellowy kind of backgroundy logo. Also, new for 2021, we're on Instagram with a dedicated podcast page. It's at What Have We Learnt Pod, all one word. Depending on which platform you're using to listen to this right now, don't forget you can also listen on a more convenient platform, be it Apple, Spotify, or Acast. So there you go. We start with our new episode with Nicholas Briggs, who you may know as the voice of the Daleks and the Cybermen in Doctor Who. He's been doing that since 2005. In this episode, we talk about Daleks, the Dalek voices, the Big Finish audio productions, storytelling, and joining the show in 2005. Just a heads up, there are no details on the upcoming Series 13, but this is What Have We Learnt with Nicholas Briggs. Nicholas Briggs, welcome. How are you?
Well, yeah, good. I'm in my office shed at the end of the garden, and it's very windy outside, but luckily I'm shielded from the elements here.
And so for those who don't know, how will most people know you and your work?
I suppose most people will know me because of my voice work on Doctor Who, doing the voice of the Daleks. And, at least that's what I used to tell people when we were allowed to go out to parties, that you would say, what do you do for a living? I say, oh, I do the voice of the Daleks. Then that mostly means something to people. But really what takes up most of my time is being the creative director of Big Finish Productions, who have a license from the BBC to do Doctor Who audio drama, and we've been doing it since 1999, and I've been I worked on the very first one, wrote and directed, did the sound design and music on it, and I think in 2006 became executive producer and creative director. And so that's my day job, which involves all sorts of exciting things like writing, directing, sound design and music, but it also involves lots of strategy meetings, publicity, marketing, sales.
And Big Finish it's kind of come into its own over the last couple of years. Certainly, as the show has grown, so has Big Finish.
I suppose so. I mean, the interesting thing for Big Finish is that we started before Doctor Who came back to television in 2005. So I forget because I filmed the first one in 2004, and I always forget when it actually came on. But actually, when the series came back, we've been going a few years. It nearly killed us because Doctor Who fans thought, well, that was Doctor Who, but now this is Doctor Who. And they did momentarily, over a few months, abandon us in their droves. And that's sort of when I took over. So I rather thought that I was going to be rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah.
But we found ways of enticing our audience back. I worked together with a great team of people, particularly in those early days, a chap called Alan Barnes, who was the script editor and who's still a very great friend and colleague. And we really worked hard on creating what they now in modern marketing parlance call tentpole releases, those moments where it's really important things. And we always tried to create reasons for people to come back. And I think through that strategy, and also people just sort of Doctor Who fans settling down a bit with the new series, and also when it was not on air, prepared to look around and see what else was going in the Doctor Who world, the fans did come back to us slowly but surely. And then of course new fans were created by the new series, and then when they discovered there'd been an old series of Doctor Who, many of them started to to look into the broader Doctor Who fan universe and discovered Big Finish. I thought, my goodness, the great reaction we get is like people coming into a candy shop and they realize how much good stuff there is.
And those sort of landmark sort of tentpoles that you talk about, they're sort of the multi-Doctor stories.
Well, it's not always as grand as that. It's just doing something new and original with the Daleks. It's bringing the Cybermen back in a different way. We created a whole new strand with Paul McGann, the Eighth Doctor. He'd been pootling along quite nicely in our regular range of adventures, and we decided to create a new range of adventures with him, with a brand new companion played by Sheridan Smith, who was quite the TV star in the UK. And still is, and even more so now. And so we sort of upped the ante really, and made a conscious effort to that this is really through Barnaby Edwards, who also directs for Big Finish and writes for Big Finish, and he was really the casting director of those Eighth Doctor adventures, and we went really for big names, and to just create a bit of a buzz around it all.
And you do get a lot of those sort of stories that kind of fill in the gaps from the classic series, and it links old Who to new Who as well.
Yes, I think that's, it's all part of the same universe. I mean, in those early days, that was quite a contentious thing to do. The BBC were very keen at that point for there to be a clear delineation between old and new Doctor Who. But slowly but surely, really through Russell T Davies, the old series, the new series acknowledged the old series, and then it became very clear that it was all the same thing, really. But yeah, I mean, so we do like to sort of go down those little rabbit warrens of continuity and talk through the detail and find out exciting things you didn't know. But at the same time, I'm very keen. My ongoing policy is not ever to shut off all possibilities. So I don't really like linking one story with another in a way that means you couldn't fit more stories in between, because I think that limits imagination. And I think one of the main things for me anyway, Doctor Who is about limitless imagination and limitless possibilities. So of course you do those fan things and explain things away and what have you, and say, oh, this is actually what happened. But my instinct, and in many cases directive, is to always leave the door open in some way.
And as a fan, has there been a handful of pinch yourself moments with Big Finish?
Yes, I have to remind myself every day, really, that I'm doing the dream job. I love to write, I love to act, I love to direct, I love to do sound effects, I love to do music, and I get to do all those things all the time. So in those darker moments when I'm maybe a bit exhausted, and I'm thinking, oh, what am I doing today? I've got to get on with that music. And I've got to talk to ex-doctor about blah, 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 blah. And I think, hold on a sec. This is like the best possible thing I could be doing. If someone asked me, what would you like to be doing with your life? It's this. So, but, such is human nature, and perhaps my nature, is that you get occasionally you sort of get a bit of ho-hum and think, oh, well, it's just a job. And you think, goodness, no, this is a dream. So, so many pinch yourself moments. I feel black and blue with all the pinching that I've done of myself over these years, metaphorically speaking, obviously. And just recently, I suppose it's a good one to mention, is working with Christopher Eccleston again, after I worked with him in the TV series all those years ago. And I've been directing him. And just the other day, I was doing a bit of acting with him. Of course, it's all done remotely at the moment because none of us can actually meet up. But we all talk together and chat and have a laugh while we're doing it over the internet. So yeah, that's my most recent pinch yourself moment. Although bizarrely, and I can't really account for this, I always had a really firm belief that Chris would come back at some point, So yeah, so that's a real, it's lovely stuff.
It does definitely sound like it was an interest and a hobby that's just become a career.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Back in the day, a bunch of us used to do Doctor Who audio plays for fun. And when I was a kid, I used to just do them on my own, doing all the voices and using the broken wheelbarrow grinding as the sound of the TARDIS, and desperately trying to experiment how to do a Dalek voice. It wasn't until years later I discovered you needed a ring modulator and, clever effects to do it, to make it sound authentic. And then, as I say, got together with a bunch of other fans after I left drama school, really, and my career hadn't taken off. And I sort of distracted myself for far too long, for quite a number of years, doing these audio adventures, because I got to write them. I got to do all the things that I now do for Big Finish. And it was a real training ground for me, albeit with more analog technology at the time. But I really, cut my teeth on that. I really learned a lot of skills. It was invaluable for me, really. And so when it was time through, for all the previously mentioned in many places reasons, we finally got a license to do Doctor Who for the BBC. I was there and ready with all the skills.
Yeah.
And really, I was the one who set the template for how we record them, how the post-production is done and all that kind of stuff, because I just had already learnt it and knew that it worked.
And you've written and directed a couple of Big Finish stories. I'm filing this under borderline terrible question. When you're creating a new story or a new script, where is the best place to begin? Certainly for an audio story.
Well, first of all, you have to have a desire to tell a story. To be a good storyteller, you need to want to tell a story. If you kind of think, I've had people come up to me and say, yeah, I'd really like to write a Doctor Who story. And I go, oh, wow, lovely. And they say, the trouble is, I haven't really got any ideas. And I think, well, I don't know why you'd like to tell a story if you haven't got any ideas. To me, telling stories is to do with the fact that you're overflowing with ideas. They're bursting out. Someone once said to me, I think it was someone at the BBC, said, how do you come up with all these stories? And my answer was, I can't stop coming up with them. It's just my favorite thing to imagine this. And one of my problems in my life, and I want you all to get out the smallest violins known to mankind, is that I just can't stop doing it. And it does exhaust me, but whenever I decide to enforce some rest, which is very rarely, far rarer than our operations director would like, because she's worried about my general health, I just start thinking of, maybe he lands on a planet where, and I'm off, and I'm imagining it. I can't help myself, and I can hear the sounds, I can hear the music, and where do you start? Well, an idea comes into your head. Sometimes it's an idea about a theme. You maybe want to talk about a particular issue. Sometimes it's a character, or sometimes you just start thinking about, what would this alien race be like? Maybe there's a race that's attracted to light. I remember once I wanted to do a story about giant moth creatures. And then I thought, that might be a bit naff. I don't know, but what is it about moths? What do we know about moths? They're attracted to light. And so then I created this whole thing about a species that was desperate to get light, but in doing that, they would have smothered the species that already lived in that star system. So the people in that star system found a way to block out their own sun so that they wouldn't be found by these aliens. And then, do you see what I mean? Suddenly you're not writing a story about giant moth creatures. You're actually writing a story about the quest for survival. And then, of course, you build into the story that there's a misunderstanding and that the people who wanted the light aren't necessarily going to destroy the people who needed the light. And you know what I mean? You start coming up with all these different nuances and characters come to mind. And then you have to work out at which point the Doctor enters the story. Does he enter it early on in the story, or is it in the last act where everything's come to a crisis? So, or does he do a bit of both? Does he, use the TARDIS to travel around in the timeline of this story? So that, you can just see how it just opens up so many possibilities. And that's the thrilling thing, really. And one of the other thrilling things I find is discussing this with like-minded creative people and working out a story, or indeed helping other people to create their story, because that's what I quickly found becoming executive producer of Big Finish. My favorite thing was to bring the crazy ideas in my head to life in some way on audio. And then I discovered that it was very nearly my favorite thing to help other people to do it well too. So that was a great discovery I made very early on, especially when I became exec producer.
So 2005 or 2004 for filming, how did you get involved from doing the Big Finish stuff to Russell T Davies and the new series?
Well, that's all down to Russell T Davies, really. I shall never stop being grateful to him. And I think that I would like to say every day I think that, but I suppose I don't think it every day, but I probably think it at least every week. He was a Big Finish listener, and he could hear that I could do a Dalek voice. And then he read an article by me in Doctor Who magazine, which I should be very grateful to Clayton Hickman for, who was the editor at the time, where he could see that I had the technical wherewithal to create the voice. So he just thought, I think, a very practical man, a experienced producer, just thought, this guy is a total solution. There's no such thing as the radiophonic workshop anymore at the BBC. We need someone who can not only come along and shout exterminate convincingly, but knows how to make it sound exactly like a Dalek in terms of the technical side. So I was the total solution. And, he made sure I got that job. It was marvelous. The hoary old story I've told so many times, and forgive me if you've heard it, is that there was a big meeting for all Doctor Who licensees, although not Big Finish, at which they presented what they were going to do. And they said, we're going to bring the Daleks back. And Clayton Hickman put his hand up and said, if you're bringing the Daleks back, are you getting Nick Briggs to do the voice? And Russell allegedly said, yes, but don't tell him because we need to contact his agent. But then 2 or 3 people from that meeting then secretly phoned me and said, look, I'm not supposed to tell you, but Russell said. So then I had, because nothing moves fast in pre-production in television, then I had months of waiting, of thinking, am I going to get the call? And in the meantime, I heard all sorts of rumors about famous people like Andy Serkis being the voice of the Daleks. And I thought, yeah, of course they'll give it to someone famous. Why are they going to give it to me? And then luckily I got the call, and it really did change my life. I hadn't had a very career-wise lucky life until that point. I'd done okay. I was busy doing bits of acting here and there, but not rushed off my feet, and it just changed things completely for me, really. I shall never stop being grateful to Russell. I mean, it was, I know he wasn't doing it for entirely altruistic reasons. He didn't think, well, how can we benefit Nick Briggs here? But, I was in the right place at the right time with the right skill set. It was an incredible bit of luck for me. And, it has changed my life, because it's rather nice that when you have a job that you do, that when you tell people about it, a good 90-something% of them will light up with delight. I mean, the brilliant thing, of course, that brings me down to earth every now and again is you sometimes meet people, although at the moment we don't meet anyone, but back in the old days before the pandemic, you sometimes meet people who culturally have had no experience of Doctor Who whatsoever. Typically they were brought up in, I don't know, South Africa or Ireland. And you say, I do the voice of the Daleks in Doctor Who, and you might as well have said to them, I bibbly boo on the babbling bum. They look at you like, I don't even know what that means. And you think, well, yeah, these are the moments that bring me down to earth, because most people go, oh my God, seriously?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you don't, do you? So it's a bit, some people, it's a bit like saying to them, I'm Santa Claus. And a sort of evil Santa Claus, obviously. And an evil cross.
And certainly on TV, you've been doing it for sort of over 17 years, and you're still a part of the show. Did you ever imagine that you would still be doing it, or did you ever imagine the show would still be on after 17 plus years?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I'm very, I think of myself as not a particularly positive and quite prone to depression. But when it comes to things I absolutely love, I think I always just assume they'll go on forever, and so I never thought that, Jason Haigh-Ellery, it turns out, who's the, the chairman and owner of Big Finish, he assumed that our license would last 3 years or something, and then that would all be over. I mean, I just thought once they got me involved, I thought we're going to be doing this forever. It never occurred to me we'd stop. And likewise, it never really occurred to me that Doctor Who will stop one day. I mean, I suppose it's entirely possible that, a new producer will come in and say, I think it's time that the Daleks didn't sound like Nick Briggs, which will, of course, break my heart. But them's the breaks. There's no guarantee of work. Luckily, Chris Chibnall, absolutely, bless him. I feel like he just lives down the road from me, actually. So if I speak loudly enough, he'll probably hear. He regards me as an integral part of the show, and sort of protects that, really. So that's really nice to feel, because in one context, I'm the longest running cast member of Doctor Who. Of course, I'm not in every episode, but to the general public, Doctor Who is all about the Daleks. I know quite a lot of fans have a hard time realizing that, but people who aren't committed to Doctor Who, the main thing they think Doctor Who is all about fighting the Daleks. That's the iconic thing, really, especially in this country where fandom of Doctor Who really, the nation's love of Doctor Who started with the Daleks. Had there been no Daleks, Doctor Who would not still be on. No. That's for sure. That Terry Nation script and that moment when Barbara is confronted by the sucker, presumably held by some sort of stagehand, because I don't think they had the Dalek prop at that point. That is when Doctor Who really began in terms of what we understand of Doctor Who. What we understand Doctor Who being, about that threat, that peril, that alien menace, the unlike, trying to conquer everything we hold dear, all that kind of stuff. That's when that started. And the Daleks are pivotal to that. And I'm just proud to have been lucky enough to, hitch a ride on that for however long I can.
But certainly the advantage as well with as the show evolves, so do the sort of the Dalek voices. Because at the beginning, a few series, it was kind of the same kind of voices, but then you add in things like the Emperor Dalek, or you add in even sort of the Dalek Khan, sort of the crazy voiced Dalek, high pitched,
giggling one. Yes. All that. Yes.
But even in the most recent episode, at time of recording, sort of the Revolution of the Daleks, a new look Dalek, a new sounding Dalek. So as the show has evolved, so has the voices.
Yeah, and I'm quite happy just doing your bog standards, commanding, exterminating, obeying kind of Dalek. But it's almost always there's a challenge, and yes, in this latest New Year's Day special, there were the other Daleks, and also like there was in the previous New Year's Day special, there was the Dalek creature on someone's back, which is a whole new proposition, which I did this time as well as last time, where I have to post sync the dialogue of the actor who has the Dalek on their back. So it's a combination of their voice and my voice at the same time, which I think is really nice. I mean, they could have just added a slight effect to their voice, but they decided what they wanted was the actual Dalek voice speaking at the same time. And that's that's because most of my ADR, post syncing, is just done to flashing lights, but and I have done ADR to lip movements before for other things I've been in, but that's much more of an interesting challenge. And by the by, I've discovered something about myself through the process of doing that. As you won't be surprised to hear that I've got quite a good audio memory. So a lot of people do post syncing and they watch the lips and they sync it while watching it. And although I can do that, the most effective way to do it with me is to play me the section and then have me repeat it almost immediately afterwards. So I hear the line, I say it. Listen and repeats our sound editor Matt calls it, and I and then they slide the audio back over the other person's audio, and it 9 times out of 10 fits completely, because I've heard the da 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 da, and then I can go da 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 da, and it just
the cadence
fits.
And the tone, and where there might be a peak, where there'll be a dip, where you go up on a certain word and come down on a certain word.
Yes, all that. I hear the musicality of it, because even though I'm not musically trained and can't read music, I do compose music by ear, so I'm very attuned to it. I can hear those differences quite easily. Yeah, so that was an interesting discovery for me. So whenever I go to do ADR for anything, they tend to like you to do it at the same time as the playback. But, I say to people, honestly, play it to me and I'll just let it run, and then let me just say it straight afterwards, and it should fit.
Yeah. And some of the remarkable things, well, with some of the voices is that, obviously, as well, you do voices with Cybermen as well, and other creatures from the series. But also there are moments where it's you talking to you.
Yes. When that first happened, in that big face-off between the Daleks and the Cybermen, back with David Tennant, there was a point where I was doing that because I had to do that at 3 separate locations. I had to do it in the Void Room where the Daleks were, and I had to do it where the Cybermen were with Jackie and the Doctor, and I had to do it in the corridor where the Daleks and the Cybermen met. And I was on all 3 of those shoots to do that. And there was a point it occurred to me, I thought, they can't put 5 minutes of me talking to myself on prime time BBC television. This is just ridiculous. And then I knew Dave Houghton, who was the visual effects supervisor at that time. We'd become great mates on set because he was always there sort of, flashing silver and green balls and things around to get sort of the light temperature for the CG effects. And I used to regularly pop into the Mill, which was the visual effects house in London. When I was in London, I'd give Dave a buzz and say, do you fancy lunch? Or he'd just say things like, well, come over for a coffee and I'll show you some stuff. And of course, this is all highly illegal. And he'd invite me in and he'd take me for a tour around the building, and all the CG artists are all sort of working away at their terminals, and he'd go to each of them and say, this is Nick, the voice of the Daleks. And they go, ooh, and he said, go on, show Nick a bit of what you've been doing, So I used to regularly get to see what was coming up in the CG effects. But then particularly for that episode, he said, oh yeah, we've got that bit edited now. I said, yeah, they'll have cut it, won't they? He said, what do you mean cut it? It's a pivotal scene. I said, yeah, but they can't. And he showed it to me, and I just thought, I can't. God, they've kept it all. I think there's one bit where they can continue talking. I think Mickey talks over it for a moment, but aside from that, they just let it run straight, really. So that's just amazing.
And the fandom, so the Who fandom, Who fans can remember exactly the moment they got into the show.
Oh yes,
I don't think you get it with other TV shows.
No. I mean, for me, it's difficult because I was so young. So I certainly remember William Hartnell. But I'm not exactly sure what time it was. I mean, I remember the Celestial Toymaker and the 10th Planet particularly. But I've got some misty memories of Daleks as well. So, and also, I was given the Dalek book for Christmas once. The blue annual with the big Dalek on the front, and. So, I mean, and I remember watching Power of the Daleks and knowing what Daleks were. So I guess I must have seen the Daleks on television before. But I can't quite locate that moment. But I do remember it's really from Patrick Troughton onwards that I have clear, distinct memories of watching every single story.
Yeah. For me, it was the when they started doing the 30th anniversary and they started to re-show old episodes. They showed Planet of the Daleks and the Green Death. And they showed it in the same way as it's week by week, and over about 12 weeks, I was like, right, I'm in now. This is
wow.
Show me more, please.
It's incredible for me to think that people were, at that point becoming Doctor Who fans, but to me it was like, oh, they're re-showing this old thing.
Yeah. And finally, what have you learnt?
I've learnt that life is all about luck. And because, there are loads of people out there who could be where I am today, but I was just lucky. I think, what helps luck is if you have the requisite skills, if you're in the right place at the right time, as it were, where, the various coincidences, the coinciding of events, where they cross, if you have the right skills, that really helps. But I mean, who would know that, imagine seeing Russell T Davies in his much younger days and me in my much younger days, very, very different people, very, very different lifestyles. But the key thing is we both love Doctor Who. And there he is pursuing his career, being a producer at BBC Wales, deciding to give everything up, to give himself clear time to write something. And then me pootling around, trying to get acting work, not really succeeding, getting involved with friends to do Big Finish. Who would know that our lives would coincide? And then, so that's the main thing I've learned. I mean, along the way, I've learned loads of lessons about storytelling, about what works and what doesn't work. And the more you learn, the more you realize you've still got to learn. I don't think it's a wise position to say, I know it all now. You're discovering things all the time. That's why people these days often ask me to teach people stuff about what I've learned. And I largely resist it, although I am doing a bit of writing mentoring. And that seemed to go okay, because I'm not very good at telling people about rules, because I always say, although obviously you can break all those, if it works. But then I suppose I go back to what I was taught at school, because I was an incessant writer at school. And when I came home, I would write, in inverted commas, books. I'm going to write a book this evening, I'd say to my mum, and I'd get the paper and I'd start writing, and I would write until it was bedtime and then quickly have to finish the story. It's nearly bedtime. Oh, and then they all blew up, the key thing is that you have to learn some bedrock of rules to start with in order to know what rules you're breaking. I think that's the thing. But really, as with anything, like with directing, when you're working with other people, it's working out what they are trying to achieve, assessing whether it's achievable or indeed a good idea to achieve, and then helping them to the best of your ability to achieve that. I'm not the kind of, so I do script editing as well. I'm not the kind of script editor who takes a script that someone's written and puts them through the mill of 15 drafts, because I'm not really paying attention. And then at the end of it, I get them to do a draft that's pretty much like the one they wrote in the first place. And that happens a lot in television. Different development producers work with people and they say, how about we blah, blah, blah. And the writer says, that's what I wrote 3 years ago. And they go, oh, really? I wasn't on board at that point. I think you have to be wise enough to make a quick judgment with someone about whether you think you can be on board with what they're creating, and then trust them and help them to do it their way. That's the thing. You can look at it and say, I just don't think this will fly, or this is not for me. This won't work for me. But try to be as broad-minded as possible. Always, see, I very rarely, impose my will on a writer. I usually test how sure they are that what they're doing is a good idea. And, if you say to them, this isn't working for me, and they go, yeah, okay, yeah, let's try something new, that's fine. But if I say this isn't working for me and they go, no, but the thing is, and they go, I'm more than likely to say, okay, well, you seem very sure about it. So let's try and make this work. So that's what I've learned, really. I've learned that I don't know much. And I've learned that, it's best to help other people do what they love rather than force them to do things they don't like.
Nicholas Briggs, thank you very much.
Pleasure.